Folks, welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Post. I'm Robb Dunewood.
And I'm Bodie Grimm.
And today we're going to be talking about being a good guest on someone's podcast or someone's show. Bodie, one of the things we say all the time is that if you want to grow your audience, one of the best ways to do it is to borrow somebody else's audience. And the way that you do that is show up on their show and be a great guest. But I think that sometimes, because you and I have been podcasting for as long as we have, we kind of just forget all the little things that comes into being a good, into being a good guest. And we figured that we probably should write some of these things down and kind of list them out, because I would say this: if you don't know, you don't know. So there's a lot of folks who are showing up on people's shows and they're absolutely horrible guests. And it's because they didn't know what they should have done or how they should have prepared or what type of camera or mic they should have had based off the show they were going on. So I thought that we could go over some of these tips and tricks and let the folks inside of how our brain works when we think about what we should do to go on someone's show.
Yeah. And I think, Rob, between the two of us over the years, we have been probably great guests and we've been awful guests, not so great guests, we'll say. It's not easy to show up and just be great. In order to put yourself in the best position, let's talk about what to do before the show.
The first thing is, how do you actually become a guest on someone's show? And I don't even think we had this in our notes, but that is a big part of being a guest. How do you actually get to the point where someone asks you to come on their show? And what I would say that you don't want to do, the thing you don't want to do, is just send out these blanket emails to everybody who's got a podcast. And it's almost a form letter, or in some cases it is a form letter. And you're simply just asking someone, hey, I'd like to come on your show and talk about X. That is not the best way to do it. The best way to do it is honestly to have some type of relationship with the person whose show you're going to go on first. And if it is something you're trying to get to and you don't know them, be of use to the person whose show you're trying to go on. So don't have the very first thing you do when you contact someone and say, hey, I want to be on your show. Maybe there is a piece of insight, or maybe there is something that is of benefit to that host that would make you stand out, and you strike up a relationship. And maybe it's not the first time that you have an interaction with them that you ask to be on the show. Maybe it's the third or the fourth time when you've actually have built up a little bit of rapport.
Yeah, Rob, we've talked about reciprocity multiple times on the show. If your favorite podcast, you hear them talking about something that you're an expert in, and you add context that maybe they didn't have, or maybe correct something in a respectful way and show that you're an expert in your field, they might just ask you, hey, you want to come on and talk about this?
Yeah. That is absolutely true. A good way to get somebody to come on your show is have them, a good way for you to be asked to come on someone's show is for you to first ask them to come on yours. But I'll leave you with I'll give you a little bit of a story. I saw someone who truly wanted to be a guest on someone else's show, but they said, but they don't know me. And I'm kind of a small creator compared to them. They were a, 10,000 download per, plus, per episode type of, creator. So I was like, yeah, I'm not going to just show up on that show. So what this person did was they did basically a long email thread of, here are the 10 times that this host talked about X, Y, and Z. And they kind of put that into a long form piece of content, and then sent it out to their listeners, but sent it to the host of the show who they wanted to be on, and say, hey, I just thought that you might be interested in this. This is something that you talk about. I collated the 10 times that I thought you really nailed it over the last couple of years. And that host thought it was great and immediately said, hey, you need to come on my show and talk about this, because you actually have 2 or 3 episodes that I forgot that I even did. So reciprocity, as you say, is something that absolutely works. They had a goal in mind. I'd love for this person to eventually ask me to come on their show, but they didn't realize it was going to be the first interaction when the person, contacted them back. Yeah.
And I think that's great. I can tell you in my own personal podcasting experience, I've built connections this way. Like when I use somebody's work kind of heavily for a particular episode. Like I'll give you an example. Tom Malogny is he does the State of Charge podcast, which is all about like EV chargers. And he's great. And I sent him a note one day and I said, hey, I did this episode on EV chargers for my podcast. Just want to let you know, you were heavily referenced in the podcast, and, you were a big help. And I just wanted to say thank you. And then he followed me and we've had a few interactions in between. But if I wanted to have Tom on one day, I've already kind of opened the door for those communications.
So what would you say, Bodie, is if you are going to be a guest on someone's show, you've gotten to the point where they've asked you to come on. How can you be an effective podcast guest? What are some of your best tips?
All right. So you should probably know why you're being asked to be on the show. Are you there to provide expertise? Are you an author? Are you sharing a unique experience or a unique story? Are you doing something? Do you know something behind the scenes? Knowing your role sets the tone for, or it gives you a roadmap of how you should prepare to be on the show and what kind of content you're expected to bring.
I agree wholeheartedly. One of the things that I tell people regularly that when you are going to be a podcast guest, your job as the guest is to be awesome. You need to know what it is you're talking about when someone's going to bring you on their show to talk about that thing that you know. So you don't want to seem like you're reading from a script. If you're on someone's show, this should be something that you have had conversations about before so that you sound natural when you're having those conversations. Second thing is make the host look good. If you can actually go on someone's show and make the host look good, you're doing them a solid. They'll love you for it and will promote you. They'll bring you back. But I have seen people do it. I've done that myself. Make that host look as good as you possibly can as they are interviewing you. And that word reciprocity, that might be the word of the show. But, when you're building that rapport and you're making them look good, you're making that host job easier to interview you, to have a conversation with you. That just makes them like you all the much more. And then the last thing that you want to do is don't go on someone else's show simply to just promote the thing that you're promoting. Because that comes across when you're doing that. If you've written a book and your only reason for showing up on somebody's show is because I've written this book and they can't ask you any questions beyond the book, that's boring for them. It's boring for the audience, and it doesn't make you look good. It doesn't make anybody want to buy your book. But if you do have something, you're going to want to make sure that you are able to effectively, when the time is appropriate, to tell people how they can find you outside of the episode that you're on. Give them a call to action, give them a link that they can go and follow. But you want to be effective in doing that so that you don't come across as you're salesy, but you are able to bring someone to your content and ultimately grow your platform off of someone else's platform.
Yeah. And if you and the host are vibing, that is going to make the audience want to follow you even more. Some things you could do to kind of help the host out prior to recording is, ask them like, hey, what's the format? What's the length? How long is my segment going to be? Little things like recording platform, but basically get the host's expectations for what you're going to be doing and then build whatever you're going to talk about to that.
Mm-hmm. Another thing would be actually listen to episodes of the show that didn't have guests, so you have an idea of what they talk about regularly. And then also listen to episodes of the show where there are other guests, so you can see how the host interacts with them. As I said, the better you can make the host of the show you're on look, the better it is for you in the long run. They're going to love you for that. So you do want to do some research, just like you would do research if you were bringing someone onto your show to have a conversation with them. You should do research if you're going on someone else's show to have a conversation with them. Even though they may be the one driving the conversation, or at least driving the interview, you still want to have a level of preparation so that you come across as authentic and you look like you know what you're talking about, particularly in those situations where you're being presented as the authority or the expert on the matter.
Yeah. What about some things that they could do technically before the show, Rob?
I am a big fan of having a newsletter. We've talked about this ad nauseum on Beyond the Post. But one of the things you can do before you show up on somebody else's show is have a newsletter, so that it's very natural that if you already have a newsletter, that you can tell someone, hey, if you're interested in me, go check out my newsletter. Because it is what I have found is that if you are on someone's show and you tell them to go check out your episode, they may go do that. But I've also found that if you tell someone that you have a newsletter and you set up a newsletter link for them, what you can do is say, go to my newsletter. That person does that. You could, for the particular episode you were on, you could have an auto response just for the people who go to your newsletter based off of that appearance. So you actually are now telling them to go do something, and you can say, hey, based off my episode that I was on, this is what we talked about. You might be interested in episode 111, episode 712, and episode 1346. And you just have links to those right there in an email that you send them. And you're making it so easy for that listener of someone else's content to come and find your content. And because you've done that and made it easy for them, the chances that they will actually do it are significantly higher than just saying, hey, go check me out wherever you get podcasts.
That is a great example of something when it comes to being prepared, right? For making everything that you do should be in kind of like, you want to be engaging with the audience, right? But if you can sell the host on what you're doing, the host is going to help you out. Like, I'll give you an example. Lamar Wilson is a great guest, but Lamar actually goes through the time of promoting the show after you've done the show. Like, Lamar is a great guest in when you talk to him, but he's also a great guest afterwards. I would say his promoting and things like that, way better than I am. He promotes the shows better than I do. So like that's kind of an important, that's the making it an easy lift for the host is always going to be a benefit. Especially if you want to come on again.
Most guests, don't promote the episodes that they're on. And I know a lot of hosts, they feel some kind of way about it. Now, I'll be honest when I tell you this. It does not bother me at all when I have someone come on one of my shows as a guest and they do nothing to promote the episode, because that's not what I brought them there for. I didn't bring you on to grow my audience. I brought you on because I felt that there was something of value that you could disseminate to my audience. So it's all about my audience. And that is the favor. That is the hookup, you coming on and being awesome for my audience. But you are right. For those hosts that do that promotion for you. And as you said, Lamar Wilson, he doesn't just do the promotion. He goes out of his way. He will create assets. He makes sure that if he's on your platform, that he is going to let all of his people know that, hey, I was on this platform. Here's what I talked about. Go check it out. You'll enjoy it. That is rare in our industry. So when you do that, the host will notice. And once again, they will love you for it because it's not something that's common.
Yeah. Let's talk about some things that you should probably avoid doing while you're recording. I'm going to start off with rambling. This is something I struggle with, but you want to be concise, but engaging. Give a complete answer without giving an endless answer.
You don't have to explain everything to the nth degree.
No.
There is a saying that when you're going to, give someone some information, you tell them what you told them. And then what is it? Tell them what you're going to tell them. Then you tell them, and then you tell them what you told them.
Yeah.
But we tend to go beyond that. We'll want to say the same thing 7 times. So you can reiterate yourself. You can actually say, here's what I'm going to talk about, and then talk about the thing, and then explain the thing you talked about. But if it goes much beyond that, you don't want to ramble on and go too far. And I just did it there. I told you 3 times. That's all I'm going to do.
Yeah. And a good host will cut you off and kind of redirect you. But, sometimes there's a fine line in between cutting you off and looking rude, and then, making sure we're moving on, keeping the show moving. Another thing, Rob, and I find myself falling into this a lot, is jargon. Like, I will use technical jargon and then I won't explain it. So if you're going to use technical jargon, make sure to explain it because the audience might not know what you're talking about.
Or just don't use it. If you can avoid using jargon, especially when you're not talking to your own audience, just don't, because people understand plain words spoken plainly. They don't necessarily understand when you use a bunch of acronyms. Like you and I have talked about this many times. I have dyslexia. Acronyms just don't work for me because I actually try to read them. I know some acronyms are so commonplace that I now just see them as a hieroglyph and I know that it's a word. But when I start seeing all these different letters and stuff together, it's like, oh, that's a strange word I haven't seen before. And it's, oh, wait a minute, they were all caps. That's probably an acronym. Let me go figure out what that means. So yeah, don't use jargon. Don't use acronyms when you can avoid using them. Make your conversations as clear and concise as possible for anyone who might be listening.
What about, Rob? What about some different ways to kind of engage the audience to make it feel more personal and less TED Talky?
I have been on a kick lately about storytelling. So when you can convey your message in the wrapper of a story, people are going to remember it more. I can give you the ingredients of how to do X, Y, and Z, but the chances that you remember that are significantly less than if I were to give you those same ingredients, maybe expand the conversation a little bit, but talk about it with a story and a story arc of how I got from point A to point B with those ingredients. You'll retain that much more so than you ever would just here is the raw information. So I am really, really big on storytelling, so much so that it's something that I actively am working on. We've talked about like I think I showed them to you when I bought them, but these story tactic pip decks, where literally it gives you every type of conceivable way that you could weave your message into a story that you could come up with, and they give you these nice little cards. I geek out on stuff like that, and just looking at other good storytellers. You said you don't want to sound like you're coming off like a TED Talk. The ones that sound like they're doing a TED Talk are the ones that are trying to sound like that. If you're not trying to sound like that, if you're just trying to be effective, like Simon Sinek, if you're trying to sound like him, you don't sound like a TED Talk. You sound like Simon Sinek. He has a very, very, distinctive way of storytelling that gives his, what's the word I'm looking for? His story that gives the information that he's giving to you in a story framework that you almost know that it's him when you hear it. So I am all for that. Go and listen to the great storytellers and learn from them, because when you can tell your information in the story, when you can actually break it down, and you can have somebody looking up and left and thinking about how did you get into the situation and how did you get out of it, that is much more effective than saying do this, then do that, then do the other.
Yeah, I shouldn't have said TED Talk. I should have said a conference talk. We've all been to a conference where somebody was just droning on about something that maybe somebody cared about, but it was so uninteresting the way that they were presenting it. TED Talks are actually pretty engaging. So that's a bad example on my part.
The good ones are. Ones are.
Another thing that I think is really important is, share your wins, right? People can relate to when you win at something, like when you're successful, but share your losses and your failures, because people relate to that way more than they relate to your wins. So give them something they can relate to.
Significantly more. We think that we want to put our best foot forward all the time and tell people, here are all the great things that I've done. And that's cool. People will be interested in that, but they are definitely more interested in the things that you can lay out as a cautionary tale. It's like, hey, let me tell you about the time when this didn't work out. And if you tell that in the confines of a story, it can be super impactful. So I'm not saying that you need to rag on yourself the whole time you're in front of someone else's audience, but yeah, let them know you're a human, that you've actually made mistakes and how you've navigated around those mistakes to ultimately get to the point that you're where you are. Because once again, if someone's bringing you on your show, they're bringing you on because you've got a level of expertise, or you've gone through something, you've come out on the other end, and they want to know that. They don't want to know all the good stuff. They want to know all the stuff that they might encounter on the very same journey that you're on.
Yeah. And let me give you an example. Like when you're in high school and somebody comes into the assembly to give a talk on drugs, and they talk about how, you know, they were a drug addict and they were riding high and then they completely fell and had to build themselves back up. That's way more engaging than somebody coming in and talking about drugs who's never had those struggles, and they're just like, don't do drugs. It's not going to be good for you. Like, those real world examples and those stories are what makes it engaging. Yeah. You know, and another thing, Rob, is try and think of a way to, and don't try to do this too hard because it can make it seem contrived, but try to think of a way to change somebody's perspective on something. If we're talking about a topic and everybody says the same thing, you know, whether it's pundits or podcasters or news, try to spin that into maybe something that's going to try to spin it in a way that's going to change somebody's perspective on something. So if we have taken that, I'm just going to use my own podcast, for example, that EVs are people are going to have range anxiety about EVs, right? A way for me to change your perspective on that is a company called Recurrent did a study, and most people only use like 7% of their battery on a daily basis. So like range anxiety really shouldn't be a thing, just because in 93% of your driving, it's never going to affect you.
Yeah, you know, and part of this is almost like a pattern disrupt. If you know that there's 10 people have said, or there's 9 people have said a thing the same way 9 times, and you come in as the 10th way and you take the opposite, the opposite end of that conversation. Even if you agree with the other 9, but you just present it, you hook them at the beginning with the negative or the opposite of what they've already heard, there's a pattern interrupt. And it makes people kind of say, I wonder what he means by that. And we see it all the time. Now, I am a fan of copywriting. I understand how hooks work. I understand that, there is a hook, even when we're thinking about like YouTube thumbnails and stuff like that. You're creating a thumbnail to hook somebody in to get them to listen to the first 5 seconds. And the first 5 seconds is to get them to listen to the next 25 seconds. And the next 25 seconds is to get them to listen to the next 90 seconds and so on and so forth. I get that, but there are tricks to it. There are things you can do that actually will get someone to lean in and say, I wonder what you mean by that. Just because you've made it interesting in a way that maybe you said something that was contrary to popular belief. Even if even in times when you agree with the thing that may be contrary, or you disagree with the thing that's contrary, you can phrase it in a way to where that's what brings them in. And then you kind of, as you're having your conversation, you kind of turn them around and say, oh yeah. That does happen this amount of time, but I really kind of believe the other thing, but I had to get you, listening to me to make sure that you actually understand the concepts that I'm going to convey to you.
You know who's really good at this, Rob?
Who would that be?
Justin Robert Young.
He's excellent at it.
Yeah.
He's excellent at it.
If you don't know, go listen to Politics. He is so good at that hook. Just like you said, he gives you the hook to listen to the first 5 seconds and then so on and so on and so on. And he's also somebody that I learned how to use pauses effectively in the podcasts, because he uses pauses in a way that adds to his content.
Uncomfortable silence is powerful. When you say something, we tend to want to say something, and then as soon as there is a pause, you think, oh, well, they didn't get it, so let me continue to say the thing. Oh, they didn't get it, let me continue to say the thing. Sometimes if you just pause and let them ponder and then come back with your point, it's way more powerful than if you just keep talking because you don't like the uncomfortable silence when you stop. But yeah, he is a master of that.
Yeah. Rob, I've got a couple more things here because I know we're running up against our time, but I want to make sure, like, during your interview and at the end, you have all these things that we could plug. But one of the things that you could do is you could be generous to the audience and to the host by recommending, don't gatekeep, recommend resources that you use, tools that you use. If you have a free guide that you can provide the host, give that free guide on and let them give it to their audience. Put your information on it, obviously, but if they want it, let them kind of have that connection. They already have that connection with their audience, but it builds credibility. I've actually done this in the past where I had some a particular story that was not done in a way that it was like super nerdy and scientific. And I just told the host, hey, if anybody wants this, just have them email me or I can give it to you. And so we did both. And, I got a ton of emails from that. It's like, hey, can I get this? And it was not something that the average person was going to be interested in. But from there, I gained listeners.
Here's what I say all the time is that if you're going to be helpful, just be helpful. It's like, just be helpful, just be useful to someone. So if you're going to go on someone's podcast and you're going to talk about the 10 most effective ways to do X, Y, and Z, and in doing those 10 most effective ways to do X, Y, and Z, you may offer up 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, maybe even 10 different products that you use to be effective in doing those things. Then one of the things you could do before you ever go on this podcast or this show and have this conversation is you could create the cheat sheet. You could create a list of resources. Hey, I'm going to talk to you about these 10 things. Here are the 10 tools that I use to make doing this more effective, and just make that something that you can give to your listeners, to give to the host, have them put a link in the podcast show notes, and just make it easy for that audience to go and get that. That's something that's so simple that you can do. Bodie, you and I can, we can say, hey, go check out this episode 50, 542. Go do this thing. Go download this sheet from here. Go do all these things. But if you just give someone the ability to very easily get the information that you're talking about, I use a product called PrettyLink. And what PrettyLink allows me to do is just create hyperlinks that will redirect to whatever I want them to redirect to. So the name of our show is Beyond the Post. If I'm on someone else's show and I'm repping Beyond the Post and I say, hey, go check out this resource that I've created for you, it'll be, head over to beyondthepost.com or actually beyondthepost.fm / maybe the name of the show you were just on, name of the episode you were just on. So make it easy for that listener to very easily get to the content you're trying to give them. That'll be linked in those show notes. But when they get there, it's just, you don't make them have to opt in anything. It's like, hey, just go to this link and you can now download this thing. Of course, you're going to if you would like to get my newsletter, you can do that, but just give the information out without the expectation of something in return. And I guarantee you things will be returned to you. It's amazing how it works. Reciprocity, it's probably the 5th or 6th time we said it during this episode. It just works. So just be useful to folks without expecting something to come back on the back end, because it always does.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of wrapping up. And we've talked about this a little bit, Rob, plugging gracefully. Phrase your plug in a way that's going to benefit the audience. Like you need to, whatever you're saying, if I'm plugging my podcast, go check out Kilowatt. I talk about EVs. How does that benefit the audience?
It doesn't. So here's the thing. And this is the thing to think about when you are doing a call to action. It's hard to ask someone to do something for you simply because you asked them to. And there are studies on this. If just to get someone to get, there's a study, and, not to make this very long, but there's a study where it was people who are in a library at a copy machine, and you would just go up and say, hey, can I cut in front in line? And people would almost always say no. But if you went up and said, hey, can I cut in line in front of you because X, Y, and Z, just the fact that you've given them a reason to allow you to cut, the chances of them allowing you to do it are almost 70% compared to, it's like darn near 20% when you don't give them a reason to 70% when you do. I take that a step further. Instead of getting someone to do something for you, do something for them. Hey, don't go download this link because it's going to help me out. Go download this link because it's going to help you out. Here is a list of the 10 things that I talked about on this show. If you want to just have it all, nice and concise and in a list, go download this thing. And there's no expectation on the back end that you do anything. I'm just giving this to you because I just talked to you about it. And here is the information. And what you will find is that when you do that, when you make something that is just very easy for someone to go and download and is benefiting them, they're getting information from it, the chances of them doing it are significantly high. And as I said, don't expect anything on the back end, but you generally will see things come to you on the back end.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We've talked a bit about promotion. I don't know if you do this or not, Rob, but when I go, when I go on somebody's podcast, afterwards, I always send them a note through an email or if I have their number, I'll text them, but I'll say, thank you very much for having me on. If they have a team and I interacted with one particular team member or multiple, I'll just say, hey, it was really great to work with so-and-so because they were very helpful. Relay that positive information or that interaction back to the host. Mm-hmm. That's really important. And I do this not every single time, because once I've been on a show a couple of times, that's not something I feel like I have to do because I feel like maybe I'm being a pest at that point. But if you do it the first 2, maybe 3 times that you're on, it really goes a long way to show that you appreciate the opportunity to be on somebody else's show.
Yeah. And it's so simple, man, but just being appreciative of the fact that you were on somebody else's show. You just said it in your summation right there. Hey, thanks for having me on. I'd love to have you on my show at some point or, whatever the case is, but you keep the conversation going. And what you find is that when you do that, you're building a relationship as compared to a transactional thing. I showed up on your show. I came on the show. I did what I was supposed to do. And then I just dip off into the ether and you never hear from me again. No, it's a relationship. There are people who I've had on my shows that I am genuinely friends with now just because we kept the conversation going after the fact. So just be genuine in those interactions. If there's somebody whose show you go on and you don't necessarily rock with them, then you still thank them for the opportunity and you don't have to ever go on that show again. But if it's somebody that, hey, this is a cool person. We've talked about Lamar Wilson on this show. I think we would both consider Lamar our friend at this point. We've had enough go arounds with him that I definitely do. I talk to Lamar probably about every week or 10 days. And it all stems from him being on several different shows and, me meeting him, over the, past few years. But it's like, there's just a reciprocity, once there's that word again, but it's like, hey, you came on the show, you hooked me up. Hey, what can I do for you? Or for him, hey, you hooked me up by having me on your show. What can I do for you? Those kind of things actually happen and relationships are born. And I guarantee you that if I were to show up in LA and I say, hey, Lamar, I'm here, he will make time to have dinner with me. I guarantee you. And I probably wouldn't let me pay for it the first time.
I feel very fortunate through you being able to have those interactions with Lamar too. Same with Allison Sheridan. There's just certain people that are kind of like ride or die folks that when you have these interactions, and just because, you interviewed the VP of so-and-so and then you guys don't interact afterwards, it doesn't mean it wasn't a good interview or a good interaction. It just means, there wasn't anything beyond that conversation.
Don't allow you to be the reason that the conversation doesn't continue.
Yeah.
That's probably a good way to say it.
That is a great way to say that. If somebody wants to continue interacting with you, unless they're toxic, but if somebody is a good person and wants to continue interacting with you, let that keep going. It can only bear fruit, positive fruit.
So I would just wrap this episode up with, here are the things that if you're going to go on someone else's show that you want to do. Number one, you need to prepare for the show. Actually, 1A. Don't just cold reach out. Hey, I want to be on your show and talk about XYZ and expect you're going to get a positive interaction. But let's move beyond that. So the first thing, once you've actually been accepted to be a guest on someone's show, is prepare for the opportunity. Someone is bringing you on to put you in front of their audience. They're putting a lot of trust in you to not make them look bad. So don't do that. Prepare to go on someone else's show. Second thing is, every opportunity that you have to make the host look good, do that. we think that we're going on someone else's show and they're going to interview us. And that is absolutely the case. But if you have the opportunity to make the job easier for that host, they will appreciate you so much for it. And the last thing is that even though you're not going to be salesy when you go on someone else's show, if you do have something, if you've written a book or you've got a new episode out or you've got something that you are going to promote, practice the conversation of at the end or when you get the opportunity to tell someone where to go, tell them where to go and give them something. Don't just say, find me wherever you listen to your podcast or watch, I'm on YouTube. Just search for it. My name is spelled funny. It's got 2 B's and the E in there where there shouldn't be an E. Don't say those kind of things. Make it easy for the person to ultimately find you in the place that you want them to find you by giving them an actual link that they can go directly to.
Agreed. Speaking of links, Rob, if people want to support the show, where would they go?
They want to support our show. Head over to beyondthepost.fm. That's where our home base is. You'll find that we've got a Patreon link over there as well. So if you'd like to get some of our behind the scenes information, you go to beyondthepost.fm/Patreon. And anyone who signs up to Patreon to any one of our tiers gets access to a little bit of behind the scenes content that you and I put out on a fairly regular basis.
Absolutely. All right, Rob, I want to thank everybody for taking the time to listen to us and have a good day. It's a terrible ending. Why don't you give us an ending?
All right, folks, it's been a pleasure having you hang out with us for this 30 some odd minutes. And once again, head over to beyondthepost.fm. You'll find Bodie there. You'll find me there. And we love to have you become a patron. So head over to beyondthepost.fm/Patreon and become a patron if you'd like to support us and what we're doing as well.
Perfect.